Good morning to you. You're very much welcome to today's event, which is the first in a dialogue series titled The Dean's Forum. And today we'll be examining the case of Nigeria. The theme of our event today is Understanding Nigeria. And we are very humbled to have with us in the faculty physically very astute and cerebral intellectuals to do justice to this event. For those of us online, wherever you are, we say thank you for joining us. Without much ado, we'll kickstart this event by inviting those who will be leading the conversation today to the other side of the table. I'll begin with the moderator for today's event, Professor Tunde Babawale, who is a professor of political science, is the founding editor of UNILAG Journal of Politics, the former Director General and CEO of the Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization, an agency of tourism, culture, and national orientation. Professor Babawale is currently of the Anti-Corruption of Nigeria, the ICC Academy. It's not here yet. Okay. Moving on to join on the other side of the table is another distinguished professor of political science, a proud alumnus of the University of Lagos, is also a solicitor and advocate of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Delighted to have with us the first professor of Christland University, Abeokuta, who recently delivered the first inaugural lecture in the history of the university. And the very interesting title of the lecture was Interest. Please, with a round of applause, let's welcome Professor Babafemi A Badejo to the side of the table. Prof, you're welcome, sir. Please, let's keep clapping for Prof. Please, let's keep clapping. Please. Another of our panelists is, without doubt, a distinguished Nigerian, somebody that is referred to as an academic colossus. He is a professor of history, a university distinguished teaching professor. He is also the Jacob and Francis Sanga-Mosika Chair in Humanities at the University of Texas at Austin, United States of America. We are delighted to have this cerebral Nigerian who is a fellow of the Historical Society of Nigeria. He is also a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Letters. I must also say that this panelist we have with us today currently has 16 honorary doctorate degrees and is still counting. Please, let's welcome Professor Toyin Falola to our faculty today. Thank you very much, Prof, for coming. Please, let's keep clapping for Prof. We have to give honor to whom honor is due, please. I must also recognize the presence of some distinguished professors. I begin with our teacher's teacher, Professor Adele Jinodu, a distinguished political theorist who is currently on the board of INEC. Prof, you are very much welcome. We appreciate you for coming. Let me also acknowledge the presence of the Dean of Deans of the University of Lagos, the Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies, Professor Abraham Oshinubi. Prof, you are very much welcome. We also welcome other professors in the faculty, Professor Solomon Akimboye. You're welcome, sir. Professor Darian Ologbenla, you are very much welcome. The heads of departments, economics, sociology, mass communication, political science, and others, thank you so very much for gracing this maiden edition of the Dean's Forum of the Faculty of Social Sciences. Without much ado, I want to invite to the podium for the welcome address the Dean of the Faculty, our dear comrade Dean, Professor Adelaja Odukoya. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. Ọ̀gá ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Falola, ìdọ̀bálẹ̀ mo wà. Ọ̀gá pátápátá, Professor Adeleji Nodu, Mojuba. Good morning once again, everybody. I'm so happy to have you all here today. Exactly 11 days ago, we started a journey that will last 2 years. And here we are, starting on this note. Be the glory. There are at least two ways in which we can see what we are doing here today. The first, that here we have now the world acclaimed, versatile, prolific, colossus, Toyin Falola with us. And at the same time, Professor Femi Badejo, with over 25 years in the UN, busy maintaining peace all over Africa, just to discuss one issue, understanding like Nigeria. There's a way to want to see that as saying Nigeria is a complex problem and Nigeria is problematic. But that does not say that Nigeria cannot be understood or studied. The second way by which we are coming here together can equally be perceived can be seen from somebody an author who said, if anybody says he understands Nigeria, the person is either confused or is a liar. But as scholars, we are gifted with the tools, with the technicality, with the professionalism to understand complex matters. So I don't agree with that submission. Yes, Nigeria is a conglomerate of ethnicities, religious, cultural, linguistic, educational, under diverse and divergent orientations. Within these divergent orientations, there are equally divergent perspectives, crises, and contradictions. So consequently, Nigeria is actually very complex. And it is against that background that it is often echoed, unity in diversity. But without unity in diversity comes the problem of governance and relationship among people, between people and within people and groups. The abuse of state power, particularly in the context of primitive capitalist accumulation, and the conversion of the state to a site of struggle and a means of production are issues that have not helped matters and are actually complexify the problem with the Nigerian problematic. Against this above background, the issues of the political economy, of the configuration of the African states, of the Nigerian states, vis-a-vis the various fault line, has actually been a major issue that have not often been focused on. As a matter of fact, Nigeria largely is what I call a theologian state, a state based on theology of faith, which empirically does not even exist in the minds of Nigerians. And it is against that background that we ask a lot of questions. Is Nigeria still the mistake of 1914? Has Nigeria still remained a mere geographical expression? Are there Nigerians, like you have Britons, like you have Americans, like you have Canadians? Why is it that Nigerians are more Nigerians outside Nigeria than within Nigeria? These are questions begging for answers. Nigeria, whether we like it or not, is full of paradoxes. These paradoxes are rooted in its deep-rooted the nature and the character of the state that is often ignored. And let's examine some of these paradoxes that makes the issue of trying to understand Nigeria conflicting and difficult, if not highly problematic. Nigeria is a giant. Yes, it is a Lilliputian. Nigeria is the 6th largest petroleum economy in the world, yet it has no single refinery. Nigeria is blessed with the most educated nationality in the US, and that's one of the most intelligent citizenry anywhere in the world. Yet, the country is backward, both technologically, anyhow. Nigeria has vast, arable, fertile land, yet the country cannot feed its citizen. Nigeria factories are being taken over by churches, yet people who live for or will go back to these churches to ask for a miracle to be employed and to be prosperous and for the good life. Officials in Nigeria don't just steal. Stealing in Nigeria is official. Hardworking workers living in abject poverty are forced to make sacrifices when our glutinous ruling class live on the sweat of the masses. A poor man will steal a goat, he will go to jail. The rich man will steal our common patrimony, he will be celebrated with national award. The illiterates are venerated, the educated are ignored, if not hated. We have democracies. We have democracy, yet we don't have democrats. Talks are more important to our politicians for winning election than citizens. To be lawful here could be sinful and be stupid, while to be lawless could be smart. Councillors get more paid than professors. Universities struggle to produce pure water and bread to survive, while the government wastes the fund that would have been used for funding the university on senators. The livings are more venerated. The living are ignored, while the poor we waste funds on the poor. Civil servants on level 6 are landlords in Aso Rock, yet professors cannot build bungalows. Army generals collaborate with insurgents. Police rent out their guns to criminals and run after young men that are trying to hustle for a living. The Japa syndrome has become Nigeria. Nigeria, contradiction, and paradoxes. Today, we are highly privileged to have Professor Toyin Falola, the teachers of my teachers, Professor Femi Badejo, my teacher in the same faculty, Professor as our panelist, and to moderate again is another teacher, friend, brother, and everything, Professor Babafemi, to discuss this issue. The tax for them, yes, for others it could be a monumental tax, but for them, it is within this. And part of the qualification for their being here, they have done works on this area. Oga Falola has a whole book of our 900 and something pages, Understanding Nigeria. Part of the present focus of Professor Femi Badejo has been the Nigerian problematic. And again, to actually tell you that how difficult it is when you come to this Nigerian issue, is that when we sent out the flyers and the names were, people saw the name, I got calls, I got text messages. Why are you putting just Yorubas? That's equally that. There's this feeling that even in scholarship, you must do a character scholarship. You must balance the ethnicity. That is the problem with Nigeria. It is that bad. But I can assure you that scholarship, indeed, with the context of those I have here, has no tribal mark. Scholarship, their scholarship is objective, critical, and engaging. And be assured that this panelists will satisfy our intellectual curiosity and wall against us, will be engaged in it. This is in the first in the series of several dialogues that we'll have in a minimum of 3 months. Because the scholars must lead the change you desire. So, but unlike in the program, who want to be a millionaire, there is no final answer. They won't have the final answer. All discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome to this inaugural edition of the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Lagos, Nigeria, the King's Forum. Thank you and welcome.
Please, let's give another round of applause to our comrade Dean. for hitting the ground running with this series, as well as setting the ball for today's discourse. Permit me to recognize Dr. Aziz, the Provost of the Federal College of Education, Akoka. Thank you for joining us. Once again, we appreciate everyone who joined us physically today, as well as those who are online for this conversation. At this point, I want to yield the mic to the moderator of today's discourse, our dear Professor Tunde Babawale, to kickstart the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ebenezer. Good morning, everybody. It gives me a very great pleasure to be in the faculty at this time, as I'm sandwiched, more or less metaphorically, in between two giants in the field who are both my fathers in the profession. Let me, first of all, congratulate the Dean of the faculty for inaugurating this Dean's Forum. I think it is going to light the fire of intellectualism in the faculty. It is what is expected of an academic community of the stature of the University of Lagos. May I also greet my professors once again, Professor Toyin Falola, who is of the University of Texas at Austin, USA. Is my teacher, as Professor Adekoya said. He taught me just a few years ago, about 45 years ago, at the Babafemi A University. Professor Badejo, as you know, was one of the leading senior lecturers in the Department of Science here when we started as lecturer one. And we looked up to him and others like late Dr. Shino Sambo, Dr. Dokun Jakun, and all others. These were the young lecturers. We were baby lecturers then. So it's a pleasure to be with him again today and to listen to him as we drink from the fountain of knowledge of these giants. May I also recognize our great-grandfather professor, Adele Jinadu, who is here in our midst. You are welcome, sir. I recognize the Dean of the Postgraduate School, the Provost of the Federal College of Education, Emeritus Dean of Postgraduate School, Professor Akimboye, Emeritus Head of Political Science, Professor Logbela, all other senior colleagues, and heads of department and deans and former deans here present. Let me start by saying this is a very interesting topic. The Dean has already told us that this is the subject of a book which we launched, was it 2 years ago? Yes, at the University of Ibadan. Understanding Modern Nigeria was the book that we launched in Ibadan at the University of Ibadan, written by Professor Falola. And I know that a lot of things have been written by Professor Badejo himself relating to this issue. Indeed, I'm sure we will all be familiar with his views on Nigeria. He titles it, Nigeria's Views on National Turmoil, a situational quadruple nexus analysis. That's a heavy-barreled title which complexifies and problematizes Nigeria's numerous problems. So we expect today to have our gurus here to dissect the problem. But it's important to let you know that these are experienced hands. I'm not going to take your time. I'm not a panelist. Professor Badejo is currently a professor of political science and international affairs at Chrisland University, Abeokuta. He was at a time head of political affairs at the UN mission in Liberia and also Sudan. Am I right, sir? So he's a man that straddles the town and the gown. And just in July, he delivered an inaugural lecture at his university titled Interest. We're going to hear some things about that today. Professor Falola, I'll be biased because he's one of those that made me what I am today. He inspired us in terms of commitment to scholarship. As I said, is currently the chair of the Jacob and Francis Anga Musika in the humanities at University of Texas. He's also a university distinguished teaching professor in the same university. I don't need to tell you all the positions that he occupies. This is a man of the world. He has had about 13 first scripts written on him, numerous conferences named after him. Many have been held in his honor. He's been a member of so many academic institutions across the world, such as the Scholars Council, Library of Congress. He was at the time the vice president of UNESCO International Scientific Committee on the Slave Root Project. Incidentally, he assisted me to host members of that International Scientific Committee in the year 2012, when I was the Director General of the Center for Black and African Art and Civilization. I need not say more. So today, we all know that Nigeria's problems, as Professor Adekoya has said, are multifarious, and they can, Odukoya, Adelaja, I'm sorry. Sometimes when you get old too, you lose your memory. I just got to realize that before now I used to think I would never forget anything. But in the last 5 years, the reality has dawned on me that you don't take too many things for granted. Forgive me, Elijah. Thank you, sir. Late Dr. Sambo, who was here with us, used to say that old age is a disease. It is now that I know it is. Before we take off, I'd like to invite our respected Professor Falola to set the ball rolling. And then Professor Badejo should be getting ready after Professor Falola's introduction. Thank you, sir.
A very distinguished department. I was admitted here for law in 1973 before I went to Ife. And I've had so many opportunities to be here to give seminars and lectures, to serve as external examiner. One of the people I examine is now a vice chancellor by the name of Akin Yele. I've given many keynote addresses here. And it was a privilege when History Department turned 50 that they invited me to talk. I have so many friends here. And this department, when I was in the dean's office, I was talking about the distinguished people who have worked here. And Ifowoshe of blessed memory wrote one of the best books on the Middle Belt, an excellent book. We have Professor Jinadu, we have Amanda, both of them were doing theoretical works. I once invited Professor Jinadu to republish his book on Fanon. We had Professor Ogunsanwo Akiemi became a professor here temporarily. We couldn't serve because he was appointed a minister. And so many others. It was a privilege to be asked to evaluate some of those who became professors in this department. Their paper was sent to us. I won't embarrass them. So there is a common argument in Nigeria that you and I are part of the problem as intellectuals. And I always say that claim is not correct. Our job is to be critics. We are not doing policy. We are not implementing the policy. So we're actually very successful in what we do, extremely successful. If others are not successful in what they do, that's their problem, not ours. And If anybody tells you you're a professor, you are part of the problem, you're not part of the problem. And I won't say my colleagues are complicit in this issue. We are not. We represent the voice of the people. And many of you who read me, you notice I've taken the academy to the public in what I call street slogan series. I just released something 2 days ago. Come on. Before that, Olosho, Lepa, Orobo, God when, last, serve you breakfast, in which I take street slogan and street sound, explain them, convert them into mini theories and say, members of the public, this is how your society is looking at. And I was surprised that the readership is a lot. I was in Cambridge to give a series of lectures. As soon as I walk into the hall, they shouted, Falola Idon, because I wrote something on Idon. And my first public statement on Tinubu, I said, Adon, let the people breathe. Everybody's now calling him Adon. So we're actually doing our work. Well, let me start by making the government happy. They are going to like this part of the lecture, that Nigeria is actually in many ways not unique. And this is an argument that one can develop with it. I doubt we go to any African country that the narrative is not the same. I've been to 64 countries. Bangladesh, the narrative is the same. Pakistan, the narrative is the same. They are all, just as you talk, that's what they are talking about. So why is the narrative the same? There's what I call anger in the South. We now live in the age of anger. Everywhere, whether it's Brazil, Costa Rica, Mexico, is the age of anger. Everywhere, India, they're angry. Even those who, if you go to Britain, they're also angry. You know, the professors also go on strike there. They're also angry. And this anger is at a global scale. So anytime you are angry, just know that you are one in billions of people who are very angry. But why are people angry and why is the scale? I call it the failure of modernity. It's a project that has failed in many places, in which they were promised certain things and they were not delivered. And they were not delivered in India, they have not been delivered in Pakistan, they have not been delivered in Nigeria. And that failure of modernity is when there's time, we have to hold another conversation. Do we create our own paradigms and say, this is how we want to look like? And have a matrix of saying, we're getting there. Take food, for instance. My favorite food is just basically amala and beans. Beans is my favorite food. My salary can afford it. Your salary can afford it. When I was young, there was a proverb in Ibadan. Oloma meji ni jeyin, oloma pupo amoki. So, do we need to, as intellectuals, okay, you want to destroy the fun? Because it is when I was introduced to Christianity, we believe that you don't have to know the language that God is speaking. So that you maximize the opportunity by having 2 kids, so you can have eggs and omelette. And if you have many kids, you're going to take pap. Okay, yeah. And then we may talk about post-colonial incredibles and post-colonial innovations. Post-colonial incredibles is how this anger, this feeling of modernity will push you to do many things. and make you believe things that are totally unrealistic. If you can get hold of women's pants, you can take it to Babalawo in Ibetu Jesha for rituals, and you become rich. That's part of this post-colonial incredibles and the post-colonial narratives. How can a pastor tell a woman in church, remove your underwear? I'm not making it up. Remove your underwear. You want to have children. How can I come to you and say, I'll make you wealthy, Professor Jinadu? Let me put 7 candles on your head. And the thing will be melting on your head with heat. Why in the world will you believe that? And why would somebody ask you to eat grass? Which they do. Pastors ask people to eat grass. And in Kenya, over 400 people died because the pastor said you are going to make it if you keep fasting. So you have how all these post-colonial incredibles and innovations are now part of us. And you can see it in the contradictions that they didn't set up. You are the most Christian, the most Muslim, but you are the most corrupt. You see that contradiction that you see everywhere. But we are also unique in our own ways. Indeed, this uniqueness that not many countries look like Nigeria. I don't think people have written about it. Notice how ethnicity is structured without a dominant ethnicity. That's very unique. So you all think Chinese are the same. They're not the same. There's just a majority Chinese group that controls China. They have so many minorities. They have minority ethnicities. Or take India. The Hindu is a dominant ethnicity. You cannot understand the constitution of India without understanding Hinduism. But there is a country of Igbo, Ijaw, Hausa, Yoruba. You've accused Buhari of Fulanization, Islamization, but he has not succeeded. So one hypothesis is, suppose there is one dominant ethnic group. How would this country have looked like? And will it have been better? And notice the demographic shift. I want you to give you a one takeaway, which will frighten. Minorities will be more than white people in the US in the next 25 years or so. Either you implode or explode, or it's a crisis. Israel, pay attention. There are going to be more Arabs than Jews in Israel. There's nothing they can do about that. And pay attention to Nigeria, whether you like it or not, it can end up becoming an Islamic republic. Average family, 11 in the north, 2 in the south. It's just by natural progression. So the population of Nigeria in 25 years' time will be 450 million. It's going to double in 25 years. And in that 450 million, Muslims are going to be more than Christians. Let us say you don't rig election. Let's say you don't rig election in 30 years' time. It's going to be difficult to beat a Muslim candidate. Just say almost impossible. Because that's where that demographic shift is going. Either you now challenges in terms of how you structure the federalism, how you balance regionalism, or you let the crisis come to you and consume you. Then you have a self-serving, greedy political class. I call this the age of greed. The age of greed. This age of greed keeps getting longer and longer and longer, but most countries have this age of greed. But regulations, law, rebellion, revolution will conquer them. They are not going to reform themselves. The senators are not going to reform themselves. The politicians are not going to reform themselves. So how do you reform them? And you have a uniqueness of religious division. The third segment of my lecture, the dean has taken care of that. Contradictions. Vibrant population, but we don't put them to use. The other argument is that the most important factor of production you need is labor. But we have the labor. But what do we do with that? As the dean said, we have the land, we don't put it to use. We have intelligence, we don't put it to use. Those are contradictions. And we have long history of trade, but shortness in terms of entrepreneurship. Resources that we have not converted to development and religion, religious society without God and without morality. Because it's a dialogue, the time I can take is very limited. So how do we move forward? Professor Babafemi A made reference to a book which I will pass around, Understanding Nigeria. This is one of 3 volumes. It's over 2,000 pages. Each volume is 7,000. Sorry, each volume is 700 pages. And second volume is in press, in which I said, if you do want to understand Nigeria, it's not going to be a dialogue of 2 hours. You have to understand it in 2,000 pages. And that is what I did. Saying, look, you can pass it around and then you have it back. I said, okay. You are going to disagree with me. Framing Nigeria in terms of binary is no longer working, in which you separate politicians and people. It's now a matter of scale. If you are building a house in the village and send money to your sister, she's going to chop it. Professor A many years ago wrote his major essay, the 2 publics. That essay, it can't work anymore. It's not going to work because those 2 publics in which he's saying you're a village person, and I have seen on WhatsApp, if you ask people to swear by Ogun, they won't steal money. Ask them to swear by Shango, they will steal money. All those are old arguments. Those binary formulation is no longer working. And then you have issues around youth. People tend to forget that we have always had youth in governance. How old was Awolowo and Azikiwe? These were young men and women. When the military came, they were all in the early 30s. How old was Ojukwu? How old was Gowon? One of them became your head of state at 30 or 29. It's not as if we have not had it. And separating that somebody who is 20 with friend from Professor Babafemi A, those binaries are actually problematic. I at 71, the one that MC Oluwa Omo is recruiting to be his dog. The young people are so as important. So let me end by saying for now, what is the future? 4 issues. The diaspora will play a major role. And I hope many of you follow the arguments by the African Union on creating the 6th region. How are we going to fuse those diaspora connections? Second, I want to make a plea that we should not lose the power of our culture and communities. We should not lose those. And I will just give you one example. If you live in the US and you read their newspaper, they will say people survive on $1 a day. I said, no problem. I will buy you a ticket. I will send you to Nigeria for 30 days and I will give you $30 if you are going to survive. What people do not know are issues around social payments, how these communities, collective cultures circulate money. When I was at Ife, there was a time 14 people were living with us in the main house and the boys' quarters. They have to eat. But we do not remember how many people Professor Jinadu sent to school in his family. We don't talk about how many people Professor Badejo sent to school in his family. Or what we reproduce in all our writing, $1 a day, $2 a day. It doesn't work like that. The power of these communities, the power of the culture, the power of the collective is so important, but it's a variable that we do not talk about. And then we are going to have issues of demography that in not having this population shortage, how we have to turn this population into human capacity is a problem. You cannot ask people not to migrate or run away. These are individual freedom. These are individual freedom. Doctors will go, professors will go if we don't treat them well. So how do we meet the challenges of investing in them and not losing them? How will a government invest so much money, building hospitals, you collect degrees at UCH Ibadan, and 2 years later they lose you? And we have to do something about that. And this final thing is about the possibility of youth empowerment. And we have seen the trajectory that where they are not corrupt, where you liberate their energies, they can code. They can code. So the creation of places like Yaba Valley and more of these valleys in which disciplines like computer, visual arts, create human capacity, in which these people are doing very well. They have tremendous coding power, and universities have to exploit that. When Nigeria recalibrated its economy, overtaking that of South Africa, it was Nollywood that made it possible. And you see the power of music. There's nowhere you go to in any country in Africa that you are not going to hear about Davido and Simi and Tiwa Savage and all those. And how we are going to empower that is one of the things we should talk about. I'm sure I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof, for the very illuminating presentation. Yes, I think you did well. You spent less than 30 minutes. I will now, switch off yours. Without attempting to summarize what Prof has said, I think it's important that we remind ourselves of some of the salient points that he made, namely that as academics, we must not be ashamed of what we do. We must not be ashamed of our calling, and we must not shy away from our responsibility just simply on account of that, saying that we are part of the problem. That as critics, as public intellectuals, it is your duty to do what you are doing. It is not your duty to run the government. So when governments fail and those in public offices fail, it is not the failure of academics. And he made it clear to us that we are in a society and in an era where people are generally angry, not just in Nigeria, but in many other parts of the world. And they are angry largely because of what he calls the failure of modernity. I think he's saying that we have to rescue our country from this failure. And he has called attention also to the problems we are experiencing and we are likely to experience. The demographic shift, he calls it, in the future. The need for us to curb the greed of the elite. And then the need for us to address the contradictions in our society, which the Dean of the faculty, Professor Adelaja, Odutola Odukoya, earlier mentioned, just to let you know that I know his name. So I think the takeaway lies in the future. The role diaspora will play, how we must not lose sight of culture as an important element that will determine our future. And now we must turn our human population into strength. This is very critical. Of course, we all know that scholars have said that by 2030 or so, Nigeria concentration of young people. If we are going to have the largest concentration of young people, are we prepared for that kind of thing? On this note, I'd like to invite our respected Professor Babafemi Badejo to take the floor. Professor Badejo.
Very good morning. I think it's still morning. Yes, very good morning to everybody. I don't know where to start from, but as the dean, my dean, has indicated, there is a father in the audience, Professor Badejo, who made many of us, and I am extremely proud to appreciate him, and the fact that he is still showing up at many of these events, indicating that he has been blessed to not be forgetting, as he indicated in a joking way. Of course, we all know that the changes with age are very, very important, but what to do? We just have to live on with that. I appreciate the dean. The dean asking me to join Egunla, use his style by describing him as Egunla. Yeah, which normally in the Yoruba, Egunla should come last. Egunla ningbeyin igbale. So, but Laja did it the other way around, and I have to tremble to try to dance after the Egunla has already taken the stage. Of course, my colleagues, Professor Solomon Akimboye, Daring Ologbenla, the HOD of my department. I gladly call it my department because I was manufactured here by Professor Jinodu and co. Professor Ogunsanwo, who probably may be online, late Akisanya, the late Dr. Lugbemi, late Professor Anifowoshe, a number of them that molded so many of us at that time when things like we are doing now were normal. It's like you get into the university, this set of students are calling you to give a lecture. You are calling people from Ibadan, Badejo Onimode, Comrade Laoni. That culture doesn't exist anymore. You start wondering what happened. Several of those, Akin Oyebode is still very much alive. We are glad. Babatope, Professor Abbas, and people were called from different parts to reflect on what is going wrong at that time with our country. But that culture has disappeared. To see when the dean said that he wants to set a dialogue process going, and he was going to have the very first one, I was excited and happy to be part of that. And I hope that he is able to keep it up and perhaps encourage students also to revitalize the dialogue. Nigeria is debating whether it's going into Niger or not and what have you. You would have had the students of the University of Lagos call a general discourse at my own time that, of course, I just want to add one to the point that the contradictions that Professor Odukoya made. But before doing that, I should say that it's a great pleasure for me to be back here. I left not on a situation of happiness. I felt myself I don't know if the word to use, but I never thought I was going to stay outside for long. I was entitled to 3 years leave of absence, and Professor Nuruddin Alao gave me 2 at the point and said, we'll give you the 3rd. And all that was in my mind was that I will go have experience there and come back to my passion, my love, the academics. But somehow a number of us approached the Vice Chancellor then that we could actually be coming when we are on leave to give lectures, interact with students, and all the rest of it. I wasn't the one who initiated that. I don't even remember who did. Professor Tade Aino, Professor Fashoyi, Professor Deji Popola. I think that we were 4 then. And I approached the VC then, and he told me, Aburo, tuba ma sheku ko sheku, tuba ma sheye ko sheye. You either return or you resign. And of course, I took the option of resigning in that kind of environment. And my wife had to pack my things out of the arts department. And I never came back near that place. There was that kind of a revulsion, but I'm glad that Professor Odukoya brought me back today. I want to appreciate also the dean from the dean of postgraduate school, Professor Oshinobi, as well as the other dean from the Edo State. You are very welcome to Lagos, and I also see in the audience Professor Olajumoke Familoni. You are very, very welcome. It's nice to have people like you. She's the founder and CEO of the International Center for Leadership and Entrepreneurship Development, a business school in Lagos. You're welcome. Professor Odukoya spoke about the issue of the contradictions. I fell ill on 1st of October 2017. I actually thought that it was the end, and was searching for ambulance. Finally, they succeeded in getting what looked like an ambulance. We entered it. It had nothing to sustain life before getting to the hospital. And to cut it all short, we got to the petrol station. They were driving the ambulance out because it was fuming. And the petrol people were afraid that. And so from that point, my daughter and a cousin had to go back home to collect my car, and with Professor Kukoyi, transferred me into a car. And when I said what I went through to the doctor after I had recovered, he said, "Oh, you mean you don't know? Ambulance is to carry dead bodies." So invariably, it's the only way by which dead bodies could shunt in Lagos and not be okay. I just want to speak about the fact that I don't understand Nigeria. It is a very complex country to make sense of, but you may also be wondering, where do we really understand? Dr. H.O.O. Coker, one of my teachers here, is, thank God, he's still very much alive in the US. I was visiting New York on the auspices of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and I invited him to lunch with his wife. And then he said, "Femi, you know, I want to make an apology." I said, "What about?" He said, "I misled all of you, you and your set, by telling you about how democratic America is, and it was Trump then, that I regret all what I taught you people." So that raises the problem that we all face in trying to make sense, because you see a lot of what Professor Falola, with all his experience and his style, pulled together to try to make sense of the situation in our country. I am trying to look at how we could not have advanced in terms of, you know, the having the good things of life, roads functional, infrastructure there, and all the rest of it. And in trying to do this, the Economic Commission for Africa invited 4 of us. There were 2 Nigerians, 1 South African, and 1 American, to look at different parts of the regions of Africa. I looked at West and Central Africa. And the whole idea was that we should come up with the pillars that are essential for the development, more or less. And it wasn't something that we started with. Something had already been done at the time of Kofi Annan, that they were calling the triple nexus, that 3 pillars, that if you have those 3 pillars in shape, it's possible to move forward. And the pillars that they were focusing on was peace and security, development, and humanitarianism. Those were the 3 pillars of focus. Of course, the same Kofi Annan was also emphasizing the importance of human rights, that you cannot move forward if you are not paying attention to human rights, and that it is the failure to pay attention to human rights that aggravates the situation of peace and security going down the drain. And when peace and security goes down the drain, you are unable to handle development. So when we were now looking at this effort for the ECA, we ended up in talking about the quadruple nexus. And the quadruple nexus in that situation was talking about peace and security, development, human rights, and humanitarianism. Being able to build the resilience of people to address the shocks from nature and even man-made shocks, being able to handle all that became very, very crucial as part of the focus. And in not making it just an a priori effort of ours, the UN commissioned surveys all over Africa, and the Office of the Special Advisor was to then pull what we are doing in all the regions together to arrive at a composite whole for Africa. Another South African was working on that with that other body. I realized that out of about 380 something, 87 or whatever, online efforts that I had done for all the countries in West and Central Africa, that 207 of them were Nigerians. And that became an incentive for me to extract that survey on what are Nigerians saying as to why we are not moving forward. And the kind of Nigerians, I extracted the survey into a smaller entity, and I have a 15-page write-up that I sent to the dean overnight, and perhaps he might be able to find a way to make available. But I didn't want to come here and be saying our survey said, as they say in all those American Jeopardy and all the rest of them. But it was very crucial that most of the people were 64-something% of Nigerians were people who had post-tertiary education, meaning it was a very highly educated set of people that we were lucky to have captured with the assistance of UNDP and all the rest of it. And so what they were saying became very important. And it was from that that I then put on the effort into how do they understand the country. And in terms of their reaction on the question of Nigeria, they equally found that those 4 pillars, when linked properly and for operational reasons, both for analysis of why things are not going well, as well as what can be done on getting things better, could be extremely useful. But there was an addition that I came up with in my own effort, and which addition the UN agencies were not excited to talk about, and that is because of the fact that they are not academics that can be reflecting, but on what they are doing, especially when governments are not likely going to be happy. And that is, I came up with 4 other problems or 4 other issues that were strategically foundation, that it's not a question of having the 4 pillars alone that I told you about, but that there are 4 crucial strategic foundational issues that must be addressed before you can have a clearer picture as to why the interlinkages are there, but there isn't a forward movement. And in that respect, I came up with the crucial nature of the governance, which is with respect to leadership deficits and corruption. That if we're able to deal with leadership deficits in the country, not just in terms of political leadership deficit in general, if we're able to take care of that, it will be possible to move forward. And then also what I called external dynamics. But what I was calling external dynamics was not new. It was something that the dependency theorists focused on when I was a student. But the West rubbished them and made it appear like they were talking nonsense. And they got driven off the stage that they were saying every problem is to be looked at externally. And the retort you normally have is, how long has these Africans been independent? If you cannot solve your problem after so long, then it is your problem. Don't look for answer elsewhere. But I refined that in saying that external dynamics are very, very crucial in making progress, because if you look at what is happening in Niger today, and if you look at the reactions of Nigeria to Niger, you cannot but appreciate external dynamics. 63 years, they say to the Nigerian, you have not done anything, but you are having uranium and you are not able to develop that uranium. Why? Because of leadership deficit, but also because there is somebody behind you that made you sign that your central bank will be in France. The money that you make will be stored in France. And should you need money to borrow, you will borrow your own money at a higher rate. And all these were signed at the end before independence could be given. And you call it independence, what was given. But you then look at the only country that stood up and said, no, we will not accept this, Sekou Touré's Guinea. Sekou Touré, if he were alive, he would tell what he went through to escape assassination, but they destroyed the country on their way out, that these were our own infrastructure that we built, and you are not going to enjoy it. Silvio Olympio in Togo tried to say, why should we be having our money in your bank? And he started printing Togolese money. What became of him? He was assassinated. And Nasingbe Yadema, who helped in the assassination, stayed as head of the state for some 37 years or more. His son took over. His son took over in a way that was, they talk about the democratic. I want to avoid talking about that. But all these people now were the ones sitting, judging the ones in Niger with respect to. So what I'm trying to point out is the import of external dynamics in the focus, as well as the issue of institutions, that there is very little that we can achieve if we don't have functional institutions. And institutions are crucial, but most of the time, people only think about political parties when talking about institutions, but there are several institutions that are essential. Some of them are associational, some are primordial, that plays different roles in society. Professor Falola was speaking about some of that. When Professor Akintoye says he's speaking on behalf of the Yoruba, you're talking about an institutional arrangement that is non-formal. So I try to put all that together in the diagram that I call the situational quadruple nexus. Situational to emphasize the fact that the nexus that the West is saying we focus on is not enough if you don't look at leadership deficit. If you don't address the issue of corruption, you are going nowhere. So having done all that, I have, of course, still part of that external dynamics is you have to also look, not just the West is the only problem. You also have to look at the various international franchises of terror, ranging from Boko Haram, as well as Al-Qaeda, Akim, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, Akim, and all those that make it impossible to operate today. And of course, when talking about institutions, there are public institutions, there are private institutions, there are civil society organizations and religious organizations. All these come into focus in trying to address the problem. I am conscious of the fact that we are having a chat, and I'm just trying to put across some ideas for a general discussion, but can note that at the core of Nigeria's systemic failure is the crisis of governance, which manifests in the declining capacity of the state to cope with a range of internal political and social upheavals. There is an expectation for political leaders to recognize systemic risks such as terrorist attacks, herder-farmer conflicts, and police brutality, and put in place the necessary infrastructure to gather relevant data for problem solving. But the insufficiency of political savvy required to navigate the challenges that Nigeria faces has unleashed unrest across the nation and exacerbated existing tensions. The EndSARS protests against police brutality in 2020 is one of the manifestations of bad governance. I need not waste your time on the issue of corruption and its import. You only need to go take a look at Femi Falana's son when he made available to the public domain facts and figures on the many evils with subsidy and how it has lost the real intentions. And he gave a whole lot, but it's inexhaustible because daily, when you pick up the newspaper or anything on Nigeria, corruption is constantly being repeated in your face, and it's looking like there is nothing we can do about it. We have become numb and unable to react to the problem of corruption. The other day, they were talking about the Accountant General who was fighting ASU on the question of IPPIS and all the rest of it. And the guy went away with 109 billion. 109 billion naira and several of the people who are giving leadership are having cases. The president of the Senate, is it on the basis of the whatever he had taken out of Akwa Ibom State, or on the basis of NDDC And it says, don't worry about all that. Let's allow the ordinary man to breathe. Okay, there are statistics on the, like I said, some of the statistics, 69.6% of the respondents agreed that corruption and lack of transparency are the greatest threat to achieving peace and security in Nigeria. Similarly, 59% of the respondents agree that the lack of good governance in Nigeria hinders the existence of peace and security. I look at what they also said on failing or failed institutions. I have to do a toute vitesse. So 63.7% of the respondents responded in agreement that religious intolerance is a major threat to peace and security in Nigeria. Also of institutional concern is the responses of 69% of the who agreed that indeed ethnic marginalization and grievances account for violent conflict in Nigeria. Focusing on conflicts as it relates to insecurity, especially in the context of intra and intra-people conflict, 68.1% of the respondents strongly agree that a society where conflicts are resolved through dialogue would experience sustainable development faster. This is a pointer to the importance of exploring dialogue, negotiations, and alternative dispute resolutions against the use of force or violence. There's various issues on development that in the same way, and the problem of non-performing institutions and how they hamper human rights. On external dynamics, respondents agreed that the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria are human-induced. They allude to terrorism, deliberate external influence leading to state failure or fragility, and the control of internal affairs in a brazen neo-colonial arrangement. Well, the survey shows that Nigeria is currently dealing with a complexity of problems, including multifaceted conflicts, making peace and security very elusive within a vicious cycle of leadership deficit and corruption, hostile external dynamics similarly faced by many African countries, institutional failures, as well as availability. When you're talking about external dynamics, I want to quickly point out that many times people are now saying internationally, you are saying what you're saying in Africa. How has the Asians been able to do it? We must face that. And that's why I'm saying that our own leadership has lacked the dexterity or the stealth capacity needed to be able to move society forward withoot getting assassinated. The Asians have been very good in getting that done. Perhaps Toyin Falola may be able to find some of the things in our cultural orientation that makes it impossible for us to be able to show what we knew, whether you're talking about Oyo, Ibadan, and the kind of things we said about ourselves, that the Oyo will tell you that he's going this way, but you'll find him in the other way. Why have we not been able to do that with respect to those who continued to control us? Why have we not been able to use what they created to our own advantage? Because it is in their interest that they created the World Bank and the IMF and the WTO. They didn't create those things, but our economists are still saying ceteris paribus, ceteris paribus. We need to sit down to reflect on what is to be done to change things around. I don't want to, I've lost time, but on the issue of democracy, I continue to insist that periodic elections which in fact are charades, it's not what it takes to be democratic. But it's been drawn into our head. They are saying, Niger, there is no democratically elected, but Egbon Falola in a private dialogue showed how Bazoum got into office undemocratically. Not only the fact that Mamadou Yusufu, who handpicked him, wanted a third term. When he couldn't get a third term, like Baba brought, what's his name? Yaradua. He brought this guy, and the person that was popular, that would have become the president, the prime minister, was visiting in France when they trumped up charges of racketeering in black women or whatever on him, and he was disqualified. He couldn't run, and they did it in a way that they handed it over. And the military then decided that the man will not be sworn in. But Nigeria, the US, and France rushed in and installed him. And so, so there are history behind. So if you are looking at the issue of democracy, I'm of the view that perhaps the only time that you can, because it's government of the people, by the people, for the people, that's what the Americans told us. But we focus on the by and not off. The off says that it's not a foreign government, it's a government for, and the orientation of the people are coming out of the people. By is the election, but the election is not even the only way. So there are several ways in the by. 4, we never pay attention to, which is the performance to make life easier for the ordinary person before you can say you have democracy. But we are deluded in continuing to be saying we are democratic, we have democracy. I will stop there. I have over, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. That was a very comprehensive talk that we've just listened to, which expands some of the points that Professor Falola raised earlier. Without wasting time, I'd like to just call our attention to the idea of situational quadruple nexus, which he raised, and which he has identified as being inclusive of governance, being inclusive of external dynamics, being inclusive of resources, and being inclusive of institutions. He also mentioned the problem created by leadership and corruption, which you all agree with me have been central to the problem facing our country. But I think one important point that we need to raise in the course of the general discussion that will start almost immediately is the point that you are looking to about how the Asians were able to escape from the crisis that we are facing now. That is the crisis of underdevelopment. And I think the point needs to be stressed that what they did, which we are not doing, in my view, is their emphasis on meritocracy. But instead of emphasizing meritocracy, what we have going for us is mediocrity. So there's a contrast between the two. That contradiction can also partly account for our problem. And the list of ministerial nominees that you've just seen will attest to how we came to be where we are. There are too many vested interests in keeping Nigeria the way it is. And unless we stop Nigeria from going that route, we will continue to run on the spot. Thank you very much, sir. Now, the Dean has asked me to moderate for the next 40 minutes contributions from the floor, and I would like to start right away, of course, with our grandfather, Professor Adele Jinodu. Prof, before you speak, sir, I need to add that I don't know who mentioned it, that is always seen in all these intellectual circles. I have lost count of how many fora that I have attended with him coordinating this year alone. Intellectual. When he's within or outside the country, even if it's outside the country, he joins via Zoom. And his contribution is what everybody waits for. Thank you, sir, for keeping the faith. Over to you.
Let me start by congratulating Elijah on his portfolio and transitioning from the head of department to the dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences. There are very few of us who can claim to have made that kind of transition. So it's you have that unique point in your favor. You know, language is a very important instrument. It enables us to communicate and to understand each other. But language is also the problem, because language is inherently ambiguous. It's inherently ambiguous. Understanding, for example, we have different meanings. And that meaning is also, those differences in the meaning must be contextualized in terms of space and time. You know, language evolves over its time. Lawyers argue over what does a legal term, what does it mean? How has it evolved? How do you interpret its constitution? The meaning 20 years ago is not the same meaning today. So when people say I'm old, or call me grandfather, and I said, well, I don't know what that means in the context of today or what you are referring to, but I'm very much young at heart. And I think in the fraternity, sorry, ladies, I'm not going to, I mean, we all talk of fraternity. That is the intellectual word that we use in academia. In the intellectual, let me use the word intellectual clerisy, for example. I have found a much stronger bonding after my retirement with younger colleagues than I could say I found with my own colleagues at their own time. So if I'm still on, it is because I find that bonding, and engaging with two people keeps me virile, strong. If I stop today, I probably will die tomorrow. But I think I also want to thank Professor Falola, because I share with him, maybe from a different perspective, not necessarily intellectual perspective, but a strong belief. You know, I don't know how many people remember the poem Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And I always go back to the last stanza of that poem. I've stopped cramming poems, so I cannot recite it word by word. But in short, what he says is that I'm in my old age now. I look back. I've made many achievements. I've made many failures, but the struggle continues. I am not going to fail, because maybe what I'm searching for, I can find it tomorrow. So never to yield, never to give up, but to keep hoping. And I think those of us who are still doing this is because we believe in democracy and we keep fighting for it till we die. And I think it's also important, therefore, to remember that we talk of democracy. Yes, democracy, but you see, democracy is an unfinished project. It's an unfinished project. And the Argentinian political scientist, head of the IPSA one time, and I looked it up in what I want to quote from is one lecture he gave, and he says that democracies is constantly redirecting. It is constantly redirecting its citizens from. It's constantly redirecting its citizens' gaze from a more or less unsatisfactory present towards a future of still unfulfilled possibilities. Democracy is an intrinsic mix of hope and insatisfaction, highlighting the fact that it will never be fulfilled. So when we talk of democracy, it is that part of a struggle. It is unfolding. And that is why democracy in the Athenian period is different from democracy because it has been that constant struggle. So I think we need to keep on that struggle. But what makes democracy different? What makes it different is that it keeps these possibilities open and makes people still hoping that even though we have not achieved them, we can still achieve them. Something you don't find in an autocracy, democracy, or what have you. But what I also want to say is that because of that, we must distinguish between concepts and their representations. So the concept of democracy, we should not be confused with the concept of liberal democracy or social democracy or Nigerian democracy. But there is something contested about it, but it also has certain core aspects, which if you look at democracies, whether they are this or that, they will have that election. So let us focus on elections, because elections is not just election, but how it is conducted and what are the within what context. Now, I just want to make 3 points after that introduction. One is that I think I have come to the point where I try to look at the larger picture. I want to look at the larger picture. What is emerging? What am I seeing? What is it that, so that is one way of understanding. Let us shift our focus from the micro level. Let us look at the larger picture. What is happening? When we look at all these microcosms, what picture emerges? What picture do we get? Of course, the picture you get would, of course, depend on your own intellectual orientation, your own, the facts at your disposal, and I mean, artisans are of different kinds. There are good doctors, there are bad doctors, and so on and so forth. But they are doctors. But it depends on a lot of things also affects the way you see the larger picture before you talk to others. And when I look at the larger picture facing us today, I see a major break in elite consensus in our country. There's a major elite consensus, breakdown in elite consensus in our country. And I think it is because we have privileged one identity marker over other identity markers. We have privileged the ethnic identity marker over other markers. And because we are doing that, we are eroding national institutions that should cut across identity markers. How we got there, of course, is a different issue. But when I look at it, I see serious breakdown in elite consensus. And that came out clearly in the last election, 2023 election, when there's a complete breakdown of elite consensus among those who are ruling us. Elite consensus needs some trust. It needs some reciprocity, mutual reciprocity, mutual trust. our ruling elite, then there's a complete breakdown. Whatever you want to say about it, that your constitution is one aspect of where you can see how much of that constitution is being respected, how much is it being upheld, to see whether there's an elite consensus. But I think looking back over the past 5, 10, 8 years or so, I think we've seen a gradual erosion of the elite consensus, which we tried to rebuild after the Civil War. First with the Murtala Obasanjo regime to recreate that elite consensus. And under the IBB regime from the military rule from 1985 to 1999, there was an attempt to rebuild an elite consensus after the first one breakdown. The second point I want to make is that that elite consensus also reflects the failure of our political parties to manage diversity democratically. The political parties constitute a major problem in terms of maintaining and building elite consensus. Number 3, I think number 3 is that the nature of that political party system has meant the criminalization of politics. Our politics has been criminalized. For example, in Lagos, even before Sanwo-Olu became governor, there was concern that, look, we are hearing that Oluomo wants to run for governor in Lagos State. And that says that is very, very important, because these are the people that politicians are using to criminalize politics. It's a network across the country, not just in Lagos, across the country. I'm not too sure of the North, but in the South generally, politics has been criminalized in this particular context. Now, what also follows from that, I think, is we have no national leaders. We have ethnic leaders, ethnic leaders. We have no national party. And you cannot talk of building an elite consensus if you don't have a national leader whose word commands respect everywhere. And the point of all of this is, as was pointed out by somebody with the president of the Senate, the character issue is nil. It is very, very embarrassing. All those who are occupying political positions in this country today, the character issue is very, very central. And we have allowed that to continue. So I think I'm looking at this larger picture because I want now to say what the real problem is, to take up the issue that Professor Falola started with. The day after Tinubu was elected president, newspapers across the says, drug lord, now leader of Nigeria. It's just when at number 2, number 3, number 4, you see what is happening. And that is playing out today over even the nomination of ministers. Some of them are now being accused that they are getting money to check ministerial lists and so forth. You know? Now, so let me just stop there because it's a long story, but I just want to highlight those things that I think are very, very important. There's a breakdown of elite consensus, and no country moves forward if there's no elite consensus. We have elite consensus has broken down in this country, whatever you want to say about it. Politics is criminalized, and that also explains impunity that is all over the place. The judiciary is being sucked in as well. Now, so what next? And that's where our own responsibility as intellectuals come in. You may say, it's a different way. Yes, we are not part of the problem. We are not the problem, but we can do something about the problem. And that is why in my first year in the postgraduate school, there was an article in the Journal of Modern African Studies, written by the Canadian political economist Colin Lees. What is the problem about corruption? Now, what Colin Lees is saying there is that if you look at the history of democratic development across the world, and using specifically North America, Canada, USA, Britain, he says their politics was very, very much corrupt as part of the democratic struggle, that it was a struggle against corruption in office, from the monarchy, whatever it is. And that one day, somehow, the professional groups said, we must confront the politicians and say, enough is enough. Because you see, the professionals have that advantage that there is what you call professional ethics. There are certain things you don't do, number one. Number two, it also creates a cross-identity bonding. You know, you're a lawyer, whether you're Yoruba, Hausa, Muslim, Christian, there is something that binds you in that, there is a culture of that, of ethics. And generally, it is an ethic that emphasizes your responsibility and you're working for the common interest, and so on and so forth. And that it was when the professionals now took up the political class and say that enough is enough, you know, you are destroying our nation, we want you to stop doing this, and they stood up to the intellectuals. Now, what we have today is that our professional groups are also major part of the problem, in the sense that they have not held the political accountable. They have, in fact, been sucked in by them. I will give one example, even from the university system. There was time, as recently, I mean, when you see vice chancellors going around with motorcades. A vice chancellor is going to a function, all the deans follow him or her. He gets there, he sits up, and they all leave. So instead of being a mirror to society, you know, instead of reflecting to society, what society should be, we are in fact mimicking society. We are emeritus professors. What does it mean? Emeritus professors who have retired are not even teaching. The concept of emeritus in the US is that you are still very, very active. And you also bring money to the university because of your status. You are still attached to the university and you still have students you are mentoring. Now it has become a title, just like chief, doctor, so-and-so, people buying it. So you now call us emeritus professors, engineer, this and that. So everybody now wants to be an emeritus professor. Now we have emeritus senators, we have emeritus deans, and so on and so forth. So what I am saying is that, see, that discipline that we are supposed to have gotten through our professional training, integrity, humility, and then a bond that crosses all various identity markers. The son of a daughter of a sweeper, through the power of his intellect, can be admitted to the intellectual clerisy because of what he has achieved. You know, but we don't do that. And what we are saying is that, and we keep emulating these people, we keep behaving like them, when we should point out and shame them. There are some who have fought against some of them, and they still have rest. So the point I'm making is that the future of this country lies in bringing back in the concept of professional ethics and using that to confront the political class. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. What you have said needs no summary. We have all listened and heard you loud and clear. Can you please permit me, the audience, to let one of those who expressed interest in making contribution online to please come on? I think I saw Professor Nuhu Yakub online. Yeah. You have the floor. 3 minutes. Unmute yourself, please. You are muted. Yes, he has unmuted.
Can you hear me now, please? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so very much. And I want to also start by thanking and commending the Dean of the Faculty for this initiative. I think it's an innovative, it shows, that, younger professors or the younger ones are coming up are actually very much alive, and they are trying to also prove their mettle. So congratulations. And in addition, let me also thank the two speakers for their very versatile intellectual contribution to this discussion. I am worried by Professor Falola mentioned the issue of population of the country that is going to be, in the neighborhood of 450 million in the next 25 years. That is quite alarming to me. And then the point also raised by Professor Badejo about the fact that the Asians, what is the source of their success, which apparently we don't have in this country. These two issues are quite, if I like, congruent with one another. If our population should gallop to 450 million in the next 25 years, and we still have this culture of not, trying to integrate as we should be as a nation state, I'm really worried what kind of impact this is going to have on the stability of the nation state, some 25 years from now. Most likely, most of us who are speaking today will not even be alive then. But what legacy of political culture are we going to leave for the generation yet unborn or that are coming up at the moment? And the issue about, the success story of the Asians, I think it is a very important point that Professor Badejo raised. And again, this is why, the points raised by Professor Adelejinedu about corruption, which I also talked about recently in my inaugural lecture, is actually one of the things that is, decapitating our political stride or, democratic politics in this country. So I think these are the issues that, this forum, plus also the, concern of the academia, should continue to harp upon to see how we can actually get beyond it in order to have a nation state that we can be proud of. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity to make my own little contribution.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you so much. Professor Falola will respond later. I think he will take note of all the questions. Professor Badejo. Yeah, sir. With the blue cap, like my own.
Kai Olani is my name. I'm a retired postman. I want to appreciate you all for letting me come and breathe under the auspices of your intellectual charity. The topic that we are discussing today is a very serious one. And I always ask, the Nigerian factor, is it kind of a mystery that cannot be unraveled in a myriad of ways, in various ways that we are being confronted by this Nigerian factor. I like to mention one or two quotations. The first one was by late Chief Babafemi A, because when you look at the political trend in the country in the past and today, you will see that there are certain manifestations of what those heroes of the past had actually thought of. Awo said that he has never considered himself as having a monopoly of wisdom. But the problem is when those people in position of rulership and leadership are in clubs, mingling with men of shady character and women of easy virtues, he and people of like minds, they are in their rooms thinking about the problems of Nigeria and how to find solutions to them. Only the deep is called to the deep. Do we now have those who will be deep-minded to think about the problems of Nigeria and how to find solutions to them against the cream of people that are receiving bloated everything, and people like us that had put in 35 years in service are still having cancer of the pocket. And I know that even if I swear by Ogun that I'll be able to give any kind of tithe from whatever pittance I receive as my pension to the organizers of this program, I'm honestly telling you that I may default. But we shouldn't also lose hope, because like Zeke said, when he was inaugurated as the president of Nigeria in 1963, 1st of October, he said, to no person, no matter how rich, should we mortgage our conscience. To no nation, no matter how powerful, should we mortgage our independence. But when we look around today, you find that there is only the money bags that if an ordinary member of the House or Senate should come here now, the way and manner people will want to go and have handshake with them is quite different from those who are really contributing but are never recognized. So my questions to you goes, what is this Nigerian factor? To what extent are we going to have those of you, cream of intellectuals, relating with other stakeholders to ensure that those in the National Assembly should not see that place as a soup-making factory, but a service-oriented institution? Those are the comments I like to make.
Thank you, Ms. Olani. Forgive me, I didn't know it was you. This is an intellectual outside the academia. I've known him for quite a long time. He has a passion for collecting stamps, and he vibrates, in fact, on an intellectual plane that is admirable. Thank you for being part of this. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is Ayo Ademili. I'm a scholar and lawyer. I was, though I missed most part of the lecture of Professor Toyin Falola, but given his pedigree, one must assert that we are now in the period where we miss out on the kind of alternative scholarship that is needed at this time. Given the level at which the labor policies are being implemented, one could recollect with nostalgia this kind of scholarship we used to have in this part of the world in responding to our far-right policies like the structural adjustment program and the rest of it. Like Professor Badejo is of commendable work. I think, of course, one cannot minus the fact that the collapse of the Stalinist Soviet Union and a whole lot of things that happen with it, are usually triumphalistic thinkers like Francis Fukuyama even came to the conclusion on their own that this is the end of history for as far as the socialist projects of socialist revolution is concerned. It is Leon Trotsky, a co-thinker with Vladimir Lenin and a co-leader of the Russian Workers' Revolution, that said that in our epoch, which is the epoch of imperialist triumph, we cannot proceed in any way from a nationalist conclusion, especially in addressing the Niger crisis. There's no way we can keep behind any section of the imperialist elite, because we are not seeing the emergence of Putinism in a post-Stalinist era. Putinism itself, without being modest, is a continuation of this restoration in Russia. So the task for us, thinkers and the intellectual working class in this part of the world, is to analyze the other working class in the final task of not only liberating Africa, but the entire world out of the grip of imperialism and capitalism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, the Dean. I think we are in for a new era, and it is an era that promises to change things. I think I want to make a comment more of, and that comment is that we have all been talking about a problem of leadership. That problem of leadership has been with us from the beginning till now, and we are not about solving it. But I think there is also a new issue or a major issue that has developed and crystallized now. And that issue is that before now, we had the problem of leadership. The followers, the Nigerian masses were like, they were ready, to follow good leadership. The only thing was that we didn't have a good leadership. But I think that now, that's maybe what Professor Ginaldo talked about, the collapse of elite consensus. I think the collapse of elite consensus has also produced a certain rebellion in the masses, that I don't even think that the masses are ready again to follow the leadership if we even now get a good leadership. That following is now marked by its own lack of consensus, and not just lack of consensus, but like a sort of something that can be likened to the youth restiveness. It's not only the youth now, even the masses are restive, and nobody is ready to listen to the next person. So that I think as we are talking about how do we get a good leadership, we should also be talking about how do we get good following from the people. Because right now, it is like everything has gone haywire. Nobody now listens to the other person. Everybody now is full of himself. Everybody is the greatest theorist. Everybody is the greatest in anything he decides to do. People now define themselves the way they like it. And even if you tell them that this definition is not good, they will look at you as if you are not coming from, you can't tell me what to do or what to say, And I think that a nation that has come to this stage, it is going to take a whole lot of theorizing for us to get in touch with what we will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. I have enjoyed listening to the discourse so far, but I realized that until we are intentional about what we want to do, that we will keep having this kind of forums. And the fact that Prof had said something about what is the role of the intellectual body in all this. There should be a common front, common voice coming up. I have been fortunate to witness the convocation in the West, and you will be surprised at the dearth of the numbers of people from Southeast Asia that are in the social science, that are in the computer sciences, engineering. It's like there's nobody in America again, in other culture that are taking courses in these areas. So they have purposely and intentional sending these people over there to come back to their nation, and they're developing. Some years back in '98, I was in Mumbai, and I saw these people, a lot of people coming into the airport that day. So what are you guys doing here? They said, we are here for a technology summit. That was 1997. And today, we cannot see that India today, in terms of technology, we know where they are. So we have to be intentional. I sometimes had opportunity to give a retreat to Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. And I said to them, I said, you guys, if you are in the West, in America, you will be a very strong, lobby point. But you will go, one of you will go back to the government and say, it's for me. We are all about ourselves. So until we have a common voice, that is in terms of association, in terms of leadership, our leaders are not understanding the mind of the Western world. The Western world is about what can we get from you to develop ourselves. They are still thinking that they want to help Nigeria or help Africa. But until our leaders rise up to the occasion and realize that intentionally we have to develop ourselves, and democratically, I don't know about this democracy, because I know America has a lot of, because I've lived there, I live in Dallas, Texas also, like Papa, So I understand that until we are intentional, that's my point here, about how we want to progress and what we want to do as an intellectual body, or whether associations, different associations, we are all going to keep talking. So I hope that something will come out of this meeting today that'll be out in the press that people will hear about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will not be taking the points one by one, but I will reflect on them. And the dean should listen to us now, because you say you want to prepare a communique. So I want to make your job easier. My co-panelist is not here. I think he's gone to the bathroom, our user. And for those of you who are not familiar with this concept, situational quadruple networks. Listening to him, I didn't see his paper ahead of time. Is presented as a comprehensive framework that allows us to gain a deeper understanding of Nigerians' complex challenges and devise effective solutions. I'm trying to represent you, sir. I hope I'm trying to define your concept. And within this concept, that Nigeria is a diversified and populous country with many interconnected problems that necessitate an all-encompassing strategy for advancement and sustainable development. And that the main difficulties that Nigeria has within that framework, he listed them in terms of a number of variables: political, socioeconomic, security, environment. And Professor Badejo said to achieve success, there must be collaboration between government, civil society, private sector, international partners, all crucial. The points also reinforced by Professor Chinadu, adding that democracy is a working project and also challenging you and I to form a coalition of the willing to fight the satanic, destructive agency of politicians. I'm using my own words. And this conversation has revealed the following: that the political landscape has elements of political instability, elite consensus issues, corruption, inadequate governance, and that all these undermine our democratic processes and hinder our progress. The last gentleman who spoke added by saying that the masses are disenchanted, and even if they now get a good leader, don't expect them to follow, which is an important point. And he scolded all of us for establishing a one-man theory, if I understood you correctly. A one-man theory means that these ideas exist in the jungle, and there's nobody is mediating and moderating. So we have to respond to his challenge. When we accumulate all the conversation from the floor by Professor Badejo, what I understood the solutions to be, as my note says, that we must strengthen democratic institutions. We can't give up. And Professor Junadu said it's an evolutionary process, and that each generation will move it forward and redefine it. That we must ensure transparency, promote good governance, bolster accountability and public trust. Professor Badejo made use of the example of the Accountant General who stole more money than what ASU was asking for. That we should encourage participation of young leaders in politics so that we can benefit from their perspectives and innovative solutions. We didn't talk about security and conflict because of time, but it's been a challenge that we are grappling with internal security threats, including insurgency, terrorism, communal conflicts, leading to loss of lives and displacement of communities. And Professor Badejo has added that if you are dealing with all these problems, why do you want to add the problems of Niger to your own? If I've misrepresented everyone, the moderator has to correct me. And the solution, for those who are writing the communique, must include enhancing security forces capabilities, intelligence sharing, regional cooperation, which are essential to security challenges. That in addition, we must address the root causes of conflict, such as poverty and resource competition. And we are warned that identity should not be the most dominant marker. That we should look for other markers. And when I was in school, the point that one of you made, students were vibrant as part of this conversation, bringing to the campus scholars who will talk about this. And part of what we have to recommend is to encourage our students to return to this vibrant tradition. In adding to that marker, beyond the ethnic identity, we have to talk about socioeconomic disparities. We produce poor people on a daily basis, and we keep producing many of them. In my media report on this conference, which will be released tomorrow, I will emphasize this disparity, that the more inequalities you produce, the more challenges we're going to have. We cannot be democratizing poverty and adding to the number of poor people, generating unemployment and creating regional disparities. The masses will agree with the point made by Professor Ginadu that we have to shift the locus of the identity marker, not just on ethnicity, but also on poverty. And to address this, it's not by giving 8,000 to your party people, which you ask party agents to distribute, but to implement inclusive economic policies, to invest in education to create human capacity, to develop vocational training. Everybody wants to have a degree. Polytechnics degree, trade center were abolished. And you see how some countries do things differently, promoting the idea of diploma in vocational. China downgraded hundreds of universities to technical centers in the last 5 years. So what do you want to do with them? And we must promote entrepreneurship. The dean said universities are now focusing on producing water and bread. We have to move beyond that to create incubators. Incubators where young people will be empowered to be innovative. A university like this important one can be part of that project, imitating what Stanford did to turn California into the 6th largest economy in the world. But we have to invest in young people. We have to invest in incubators. And as we invest in them, they will create opportunities for themselves, for marginalized populations, and they will reduce poverty. We didn't talk about environment, unfortunately, and I plead that the dean, he ran away, should do another dialogue exclusively on the environment, ecological issues, pollution, because they all intersect with your health, with my health, they intersect with job creation, and that deforestation, pollution, climate change impact, endangering biodiversity, they affect livelihoods. And we have to pay attention to this. We have to emphasize sustainable development practices, invest in renewable energy sources, promote environmental awareness, encourage sustainable farming practices. Please don't give up on yourself. You are not, please don't do that. You did not create yourself. Don't give up on yourself, individuals. And don't give up on your institutions. Don't give up on your communities. And don't give up on your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. While I wait for the dean to say whether we have any more time, by my time is up. Mr. Dean. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'll do just that. The communique committee, I hope you noted what Professor Falola just did. He's just completed the job for you. I wish you could just get in touch with him to take his notes, the communique committee. Thank you. Now we will welcome one or two more comments. Yeah. Okay, one of the people, before I call Professor Asobele, one of the people online had expressed intention to make a contribution. I think she's Mrs. Bola Adetula. Please, you have the floor, ma.
Thank you very much. Professor Falola, I thought I would be able to meet you in Lagos. I have been interacting with you now for some time. We are both in the US. And Professor Badejo, it's nice seeing you again. You have not disappointed me. Now, quickly to my point. I want to take on Professor Jinadu. He was recommending that the professionals should be considered and so on and so on. Let me put it to you, sir, Prof. When the professionals get there, they will join the bandwagon. Not from their own free will, but pressure will be mounted on them to work with, and they'll be telling you this is your own time. Opportunity will not come twice. Yes, and they will do that for you. So I'm just putting it to you. You all remember what happened when we were so happy when we had a very young, a youth. Was it in the Senate or in the House of Rep? The rest, as they say, is now history. Now, my fellow retiree, we're in the same boat. After 35 years, I cannot boast of 100,000 naira as pension. Whereas some people are collecting about 3 to 4 pensions in this same country. Retire as the council chairman, retire as a commissioner in the state, retire as a governor of the state, you retire as a senator or whatever. Only after four years. And these guys are collecting millions. Those of us that put in 35 years, I cannot boast of 100,000, but in my own case, COVID jackpot me to America and I stayed put. So I'm lucky to be there. Professor Badejo, you mentioned that they told you that ambulance is for the dead people. That is a serious one. I will not want to go to that. Now, my recommendation on corruption. I don't know what you are going to do, but if you can get the civil service, that is the civil servants, to do what they are supposed to do. Imagine the scenario. We just wake up maybe one day, and then the civil servants, maybe 80% of them at the federal level, and then maybe 50% at the state level, and then another 50% at the local government level, decide to take a 360-degree U-turn. Everybody will be wondering that Nigeria is now a better country. Our problem, I can tell you that I retired as a civil servant. I know what's going on there. Our problem are the civil servants. They will make life miserable for you, the minister, with good intention. And if you don't succumb to them, they will make sure you fail or you are finished. They will kill you. I don't want to give examples. So what are we going to do to the civil servants? They have entrenched themselves there. I will not want to give you examples. Now, when you are considering the issue of security, remember to include the problem of drug. It is a real problem in Nigeria. In those days, Nigeria just used to be a transit country. We are now a manufacturing country of illicit drugs, and we are now user of these illicit drugs. Let me stop there. I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. We will take 3 more contributions before the communique committee comes to present the communique. I'd like to recognize first Professor Asobele, Professor Akimboye, Dr. Aziz, Provost. Okay, and okay, one more. Okay, 2-2, please, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Thank you.
I'm very sorry that I came late. You know, we have National Academy of Letters, and that's what we are doing. And they're trying to give awards to people. In my same self-righteousness, we have l'Académie Française. It's not quota system. That was what I was saying. Académie Française is not quota system. You said you put one from Sokoto State and the rest of them. So I tackled them there. That's why I came late. I'm very sorry. I don't know, Prof. I came before because of Badejo and where is Falola? Okay. Last year I was with him at LASU. You know us. Last year I was in LASU. The other year I was IBB. They kept on calling me to come. Now I said, I'm not I'm not going anywhere. I will stay put. And Badejo, I've given Badejo a copy of what I've just done in the library here this June. My question is understanding Nigeria. When I see, is it quota system? You know, Badejo for all his life was fighting the federal government for quota system. Sokoto cutoff point will be 12, and Lagos State 90, and the rest of them. And they thought what Badejo was saying was not right. You don't manufacture mediocrity in Nigeria. Understanding Nigeria. He has been fighting all his life on understanding Nigeria and fighting quota system. And me, what I do is to go to pages of newspapers. Most of my students are in Guardian, so they give me pages, 2 pages, and I tackle Nigeria. Understanding Nigeria means that we must restructure and go into economy of Nigeria. And like as I said in Guardian some 10 years ago, the Ajaokuta must be revisited. And then the idea of driving the Igbo away in 2017, I tackled the Ariwa. I'm an Ariwa person. I tackled them. They did not drive away. This understanding Nigeria is that we must try to tackle them, the power that be. Don't be afraid. Like Badejo, I was afraid for him when he was fighting some years back. Thank you very much.
My contribution is just to speak to our colleagues in the academia. I also noticed that there has been production of ideological intellectuals, and that also brings me to the issue of the student unionism, because I'm aware in this university that for over 10, 15 years, there hasn't been student unionism. And it's we can't, it's like we need to regenerate ourselves. Understand? I've had this discussion with Dr. Asiru, he's not here, because in the next 10 years, you see that we might not have this generation in the academia again. Who replaces us? So it's a serious matter we have to also contend with, so that we can get people who can also continue from where Professor Falola and their generations, and some of us, have stopped. So I feel that for us to be able to make some of the changes we are talking about, we also need a new generation of ideologically clear academia. We are the first-class graduates of University of Lagos. Where are they? They've gone out. You understand? There must be a policy where they must be, they must be sustained. You understand? Yes, no, because the university system must make it a policy. Excuse me, please. I'm an administrator. No, please. I'm talking to us as academia. We must, and as academics too, we must also be patient with them. We must be patient with them to also allow them to also want to join us. We must. No, I don't think so. So the issue is that let us also encourage the contribution of the younger ones, make them academia as we are, and let them also contribute their quota. Thank you.
Sorry, I will come to you. There are anxious people online, and I don't want them to feel that we are shutting them out. I have 4 hands there. I can see Baba, but let me start with Professor Gundawale. Professor Gundawale, can you unmute yourself? Please unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Baba Wale. Understanding Nigeria is a very direct question and very appropriate. Some of us have been trying to understand Nigeria as far back as 1975 when we joined the University of Lagos. Well, because of time, I will just mention 4 important points there. If Nigeria is where it is today, it is because the colonization process is incomplete. And that brings me to the point made by Professor Badejo, the external dynamics. Before Dr. Arikana came out to expose France and the secret agreement with former colonies, not many people knew what was going on. Is there no secret agreement between Nigeria and the Anglo-Saxon? Why is it that each time we have problem in Nigeria, election, a transition of power to another, we always have one former Prime Minister of Britain or former Foreign Minister of US, and recently too, what was the conversation between Ashiwaju and the former British Prime Minister that came here? Now, all this we need to look at. And we should be able to know that there is something there between the interlopers, colonial interlopers, and the existing government. We saw it clearly in the case of Zimbabwe that time, when Zimbabwe was to be given independence. They signed an agreement that you don't talk about land until 20 years. Well, Mugabe kept silence for the 20 years, and when they raised the issue, they imposed sanctions here and there in order to destroy Zimbabwe, which means there is still that shrine, tying the so-called independent African state to its former colonial interloper. Nigeria one is so strong that there is no time to say everything, but I will only ask some questions. Why was it that after the first coup and first coup and Aguiyi Ironsi imposed unitary system, why was it that it's only when the commissioner of Britain toured the northern states and came back to Lagos, the crisis started there? Why was it that when they were tired with Gowon, because he was laying foundation for economic development, that is now part of the program, they removed him, they brought Murtala Muhammad. Murtala Muhammad was in England as part of the effort by Gowon to send those big generals away to see if he can thwart the planned coup. But Murtala Muhammad came back to Nigeria on British Airways. British Airways have been banned in Nigeria because of their link with apartheid South Africa. The only British airline touring Nigeria then was Caledonian. There was no Caledonian flight to Nigeria. The only flight going from Britain was meant for South Africa and British Airways via Nairobi. He brought Murtala Muhammad alone to Kano. Well, I don't know, but I want you to reflect on that. And when, again, they tried to frustrate and June 12 effort, and Babangida annulled that election, why was it that it's from UAC that they got the only capable Nigeria to rule Nigeria as interim authority? Let me leave that one there now. But the issue is that Nigeria is still a colony. Why is it not functioning well? Again, because Nigeria is a fake nation. A fake object always mimic the genuine, authentic counterpart. We ask, Nigeria is still here. We've been building Ajaokuta for 40 years plus. The same company that was handling Ajaokuta was the one that built the first steel complex for Egypt. I will round up. And the one that built the one for India. They are programming to be completed and go into operation within 5 years. Egypt completed their own within the stipulated time. India completed 4 months, 4 years, 6 months. And their operation. Egyptian started another complex just 2 years ago by the same company. Now, Nigeria's one is still there. Why? Nigeria has airways. We have some other viable enterprises, tire making and others. But where are they now today? Again, it shows that we need to actually carry out to determine in order to understand Nigeria. You see,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much, sir. I'd like to call on Mr. Okelechuku. After that, Baba Aye, and the last person, Dr. Lon Tobauju, online. Mr. Okelechuku.
Good afternoon, sirs, and good afternoon.
2 minutes, sir. 2 minutes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I'm hearing you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ruben. I am a product of the faculty and the department. I want to, first of all, thank Professor Laja, who invited me this morning to this forum. And I also want to thank Professor Jinodu, whose work I am using to work in my dissertation at the University of Leeds in England here. I also want to thank Professor Falola. I am also using his books to work. I want to thank Professors Akimboye, Babawale, Onoha, Professor Globenla, GSM, Okeke, Ona, Otto, Tola, and my colleagues, Dele, Ebenezer, and Ahmed. So I want to thank each and every one of you. I am happy to be here today. Professor Laja was my course advisor for 4 years. I am his product, so I am happy. So without wasting time, I want to take it from what Professor Toyin said, that the academia, that it is not our fault. Yes, but at the same time, we have a very significant role to play. For example, we know that the academia has little influence over the political class. But what about the elections that the academia has been supervising for years? What kind of election have we been providing for Nigerians? And I want us to talk to ourselves as the academia. And then secondly, we have to also talk about knowledge production. What kind of knowledge do we produce? What kind of graduates do we produce? The graduates of social sciences or political science, where do they dream to see themselves? How do they fit into the society? If you come to the West here, and Africa is a case study, but what are we doing on our own? For example, the issue of conflict, terrorism, ethno-religious conflict, foreign policy, global governance, state fragility, ungoverned territories. What are we doing to make sure that the masses in the social sciences even understand this, so that even though there is lack of elite consensus and mass consensus, which has created a chaotic and anarchical society, but how do we, as the academia, put this knowledge, produce this knowledge, and make our people to understand those concepts first, so that we can start from the bottom while climbing up? So that's my question. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Baba Ye, I recognize Professor Alade Fawole, who is online. I also recognize Professor Shuneye. Professor Jinodwa said we should not use emeritus, but please permit me to say Emeritus Dean of PG School, University of Lagos. So, Baba Ye.
Thank you very much, Egbo, and greetings. In the interest of time, I'll be brief. I'll speak just to one thing, and present what I think could be done in that light. A lot has been said about corruption as the problem. I agree corruption is a problem, but I don't think that it is actually the prime problem. There's nowhere they don't steal chickens at night, be it in the West, and a lot has been said in this regard in terms of South Asia, Southeast Asia. There are a number of studies, and I'll particularly point out Mushtaq Khan, that not only shows how corruption takes place in these places too, but how this gets tied into expanded, capital accumulation as against the perpetual primitive accumulation we have in Africa in general and in Nigeria. Now, what do I see as the problem? A number of scholars come close to grasping this, in my view, like, Alice Amsden, in looking at how the late industrializers industrialize. They just limit it to the periodization, but in ways that don't look at the issues of power, the issues of sovereignty, and they look at it from learning and all that. But I would say the problem, in my view, is that the African region gained independence, could become sovereign only at the tail end of the post-World War II order, which enabled the generalization of an approach that's centered the state and public services, which gave birth to, the Keynesian welfare nation state in the West and the developmental state. This was the period of dependent democracy, the development in Latin America, in Asia, and all that. And you can see the difference in our First Republic's efforts. And it was not only in Western Nigeria, which reflected having that last window. And the developing world tried, as that window was being shut in 1974, to call for the new international economic order. And what I'm saying about how Africa was late in terms of sovereignty can be seen in that, of the African countries that were at the Bandung Conference in 1955, just Ethiopia, Egypt, and arguably Liberia, so to speak. We are independent countries there. So now, what is to be done? I think that the fact is that the global order, it enables and constrains different possibilities. The neoliberal order that came in the wake of Thatcherism and Reaganomics is such that it is actually almost impossible to have the kind of vision we have become consummated. The Lagos Plan of Action itself, just like the call for NIEU, was, a cry of that period of non-domitis of the preceding era. So what is to be done? I think that as intellectuals, and where you have serious states here, and this is not just abstract, it is concrete, anti-imperialism. I think there's the need to chart out, a project, a research project, a political project, a radical project for a new international economic and ecological order, by whatever name does couch. As Professor Falola pointed out, that is also because the fact is that the way we are going, there will even be no world, or at least there could still be a world, but a scorched earth where humankind has not only extincted itself, but all life. Thank you very much.
Dr. Olontobaoju, and then the last two comments from here. Professor Olontobaoju, I'm sorry. Professor Olontobaoju, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really very happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank Professor Falola and Professor Badejo for the insight. I want to build my very brief comment around this two leads provided by these scholars. The issue of corruption and ethnicity, as distilled by Professor Falola, and the issue of breakdown elite consensus and external dynamics by Professor Badejo. And I think one thing that I would put on the table first is the need for a path to implementation, so that all of this that we are talking about not just amount to sanctimonious injunctions. We just keep talking about these things, but they go nowhere. They speak to no issue because there is no power of implementation behind them. How do we put them on the front burner as a national conference, as something that we need to talk about? The issue of external dynamics, which is now becoming a concrete issue in African discourse, is something that must be put on the table because, as has been said, the question that they put to Africans is, what have you been doing in the so many years after slavery, the so many years after colonialism? What have you been doing? Why have you not improved? And of course, the Yoruba adage about the cripple, what is weighing the cripple down, it's always there. So we need to put this concretely on the table. And I think one issue that I really want to posit is that we also have this, we've been bogged down by this inability to build a moral consensus. A moral consensus, those things of value, those things that we can really talk about as constituting the value notions of the community. I think we really need to concentrate on that. We can talk about our laws, the inability to protect our laws because the lawmakers are actually the law breakers. So the culture of impunity, how do we get around that? How do we get around a situation where known thieves, known, not hidden, known thieves, are established in the corridors of power, and we seem powerless about it, and we stop talking about it, and we just allow them to go on doing whatever they can? Yes, Professor Falola said that the academia may not be to blame, but I think, as one of the last speakers said, we really must look at what's happening in the academia. The problem of the inversion of meritocracy. How has it been allowed? Oshundari talked about VCs without CVs. We have professors who are much longer in politics than in concrete academic, whose CVs are much longer in politics than in concrete academic achievement. So how do we talk about all of these and place them concretely on the national table? I think that's what we
have lost
as
you.
a national discourse. Sorry? Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me?
Please round up, sir.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, I hope that you heard most of what I said, but I think we must run away from, or we must find a way to depart from this, what has been described as cascading of mediocrity. So a mediocre gets into office, employs or appoints a mediocre, and it cascades downwards. And at the bottom of it all, we are going to be doomed. Thank you very much. Please let us see how we can implement all of this. Let us see how we can put it all on the national table. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. My friend from the Creative Arts Department.
Thank you very much, Prof. My name is Temitope Fagua. I'm actually from the Department of History. Department of History. So I want to say that I think one of the most things that that can come out from this fora is a total agreement that in understanding Nigeria, there's a necessity for Nigeria to prioritize our educational sector. I think there is a concrete need for us to emphasize that the Nigerian state have got to understand that the educational sector is a sine qua non factor to development and growth, and as such cannot be relegated and cannot be treated as, with levity. And I think as academics also, we have the ultimate duty of resisting any attempt by the Nigerian state to commercialize our universities. Essentially, because we have, wards, we have children, we have relatives in some of these places, because unfortunately, we have some of our members who are in a way attempting to rationalize why the school fees have got to be high. I think there's a necessity for us to clearly, disagree on that note. The Nigerian state have got to fund the educational sector, not just to some certain limits. And let me conclude by saying that I think ultimately there is a need for us to, again, make emphasis around the colonization of the Nigerian state itself. The entirety of what we have discussed today shows clearly why the Nigerian state have got to be decolonized. And like Prof said, like the other time, this looks like a fake, establishment object. And that's why there's a need for, the reference was made again about the civil service. But if we understand why we have got to decolonize the entirety of the Nigerian state, we understand that the civil service is just like one of the objects that have got to be decolonized, like the military institution, like, the entirety of the sectors, because the entirety of these systems are nothing but the creations of the colonial state, and their creations were meant to render the economy, of the colony, almost useless and predative in nature.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I want to join others in congratulating our Dean for introducing this kind of intellectual forum. I think it's the kind of thing that we are supposed to be doing as intellectuals, as academics. I won't say that. I want to also applaud our two intellectual giants, Professors Falola and Badejo, for drawing your perspectives to the issues that we have been discussing. The topic is highly topical, understanding Nigeria. And I believe that there's no consensus that makes it categorically imperative that we should understand everything about Nigeria. There's nobody here that can say he understands everything about Nigeria. Nigeria is a complex state, and it has so many problems, multitudinous, multidimensional, multifaceted problems, difficulties, challenges, and encumbrances. And for us to be able to mitigate this or circumspect this, there's need for us to really look at the topic deeply. And so we want to appreciate our scholars for bringing that perspective to it. Now, just two issues. The first one is that of due process. That's one thing that I observe, that we don't cherish in this nation, in this country, due process. We don't follow due process. And it's very, very calamitous that that should be happening. Highly critical. We don't follow due process. And I believe that we are not in a banana republic where rules and regulations are bastardized, where laws and orders are flagrantly violated with impunity and without the slightest compunction. There is a need for us to embrace due process. It happens everywhere, all over the country, even at the microscopic level, even at our own level here. We don't follow due process, and it's a major problem at stake that we should try to embrace. And a related issue is that the one that the chairman mentioned, the issue of mediocrity as against meritocracy. That is also very crucial. I don't think we look at that deeply. There's need for us to embrace merit. Merit, for me, should not be sacrificed on the altar of political expediency or parochial exigency. I believe for us to be able to move forward, there is a need for us to embrace merit in every area of our life. We are talking about the appointment of ministers, even at microscopic level, at our own micro level here. You know, we don't follow merit in terms of maybe admission of students, appointment of staff. We don't follow merit. I believe it's something that should be embraced. I just want to stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for recognizing me. I believe say we don't speak plenty in Igbo thus far. But one thing where I know say our main problem is this particular government does not have business in business. Now that phrase go can be the reason why today, as I don't come straight, everywhere people are gnashing their teeth, many Nigerians are complaining. And that is why the dollar is rising, the naira to dollar is rising to about 1,000 naira. Now, because of say naira to dollar, I say it's about 1,000 naira. Now, because of say government no get business in business, we are getting a situation where, as it is today, petrol price is going to become close to 1,000 naira very soon. It's about 750 now. But them say government no get business in business. All of the refineries have been killed and the rest. So we need all these things to be discussed. I'm happy that today now, Professor Ladia is now the head of social science. So already that discussion does start. And I think that we need to keep it more and more on. Now, when people talk about followership, how we won't they get correct followership when waiting we get for different newspapers, television, and all the rest. Now say this one are Yoruba, this one are Hausa, this one are Igbo. Like you say, if you carry Igbo, go market, say, I'm an Igbo man, sell rice for me for 50 naira. I be Yoruba man, I be friend of a Milokan, sell rice for me 500 naira. All those things would not be able to happen. So I think that we need to characterize, especially like what Babafemi A position, that why are we afraid of the alternatives? Why are we afraid of having in UNILAG? We are hating ourselves. For instance, I would have never known that Oduduwa did not come from Sudan or come from heaven if I had not read books by Professor Toyin Falola. You get it? And so, you know, we had a lot of lies that many of us grew up to know about. They were more of fallacies and what have you. So the rise of alternatives, we must not be afraid of coming to tell ourselves about the alternatives. And what be this alternative? Government need to start having business in business. We need to have a situation where we won't have just 5 people having the money that is enough to feed 200 million people. We need to make sure that 200 million people can be able to have that wealth redistributed. And finally, I don't talk, say we'll get union back for UNILAG. And also too, we are afraid of something. The current president said before contesting that he wants to recruit 50 million youths into the army. Me, I don't get Mozu for arm. I don't want to go fight war. Let Nigerians rise and say no to the war in Niger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you will all agree with me that we have had a very interesting session. And the participation has been very active, animating, innovating, energizing. So I want us to give ourselves a round of applause. May I recognize the presence online of our immediate past Vice Chancellor, Professor Toyin Ogundipe. I'm sure he's here because his former teacher, who were both at the Babafemi A University, then University of Ife when we were there. And Professor Falola also taught him. So thank you for coming, sir, and honoring your teacher. The Lord will honor you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Now,
very much.
having said all this, it is clear that this panel has been a very interesting panel. And what we have taken away from Professor Falola and Badejo is more than what we can read in any other book. And Professor Jinodu, have been personally enriched by their contribution this afternoon. And I know that we are just starting the debate. We congratulate the Dean of the faculty for initiating this idea. I must tell you, as far as you and me are concerned, I'm an elder, even though there are more senior elders here. So I want to say that you have started well and you will end well. Therefore, may I announce on this note, first of all, to say that we are coming to an end of the program. I am thanking Professor Toyin Falola all the way from Texas for honoring this invitation and for giving us these takeaways that will remain with us for a very long time. Professor Badejo, thank you for what you have shared. We remain appreciative of your contributions. Professor Jinadu and every other person that has commented, especially the very senior elders here, we appreciate your comment. And I thank you too for also being very wonderful audience with your very rich questions and comments. And I hope this is just the beginning of good things to come in the faculty. On this note, I want us to give them one more round of applause and hand over to the master of ceremony. Thank you very much.
Please, let's keep clapping for our panelists, please. Okay, so very quickly, call on the head of Department of Political Science, who is part of the very small team that organized this particular edition, Dr. Miriam Quadri, to present the communique of this forum. Please, let's give her a round of applause. Please clap for my HOD, please. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Yeah, permit me to align with the already established protocol. I'm sure you will agree with me that, like Prof said, this has been a very impactful session. The hours you have spent, it's not hours wasted, because I know we have been enriched more on the subject matter that we have discussed here this morning. Yes, for the purpose of pushing out there what we have discussed here today, like so that at least the society we know that we are not lacking in our responsibility, especially in interrogating the problematic of the Nigerian state. So we have this communique. It may not be exhaustive because the program is being recorded. So, and I believe that the faculty will make the recorded version available to everyone that has participated both on site and online. So we have a brief communique. The discourse this morning observes that the arguments that academics are part of the Nigeria's problem is wrong, because as academics, we are supposed to be critics. We represent the voice of the people, and hence we are not part of the problem. So it is not the failure of academics that policy fail in government. The blame squarely, as the discourse observed, fails on the laps of the people in government, especially the elites. The discourse also observed that there is so much anger in the South. We now live in the age of anger in the global South, because the realities are the same in the countries in this part of the world. The question is, why are people angry, and why is the scale grand? The reason is the failure of modernity, as our erudite professor observed, which has seen the promises not being fulfilled. The discourse also observed that our structure is unique in Nigeria because there is no majority ethnic group, unlike many countries and societies around the world. And then also there's also the demographic shift from the normal realities of today into the future that will be bewildering. We are also in the age of greed. The discourse actually observed that. It was also observed that framing Nigeria in terms of binary formulation is no longer working. This is because the bonds are breaking in contradiction to AK theory. And also it was observed that Nigeria is a very complex country to make sense of, and the discussion on the subject matter cannot end here today. It's a discussion that we continue. Okay, and so also the triple nexus, the peace and security, development and humanitarian, as developed by UN Kofi Annan, may be capable of addressing the development deficits here. And these four pillars of peace and security, human rights, development and humanitarian, when they are linked properly, could be extremely useful in triggering our development. Four other issues were also observed to be foundational strategic issues that must be addressed before the quadruple nexus can take effect or even be effective. And they are the crucial nature of governance concerning leadership deficit and corruption, external dynamics, which are very crucial in understanding everyday life in Africa, including Nigeria. The issue of functional institutions are also crucial. They discuss, and also resources. The discourse also observed that corruption and lack of transparency, lack of good governance are abingas against peace and security in Nigeria. Other issues here include religious intolerance, terrorism, deliberate external influence in the ways that are injurious to the nation being, institutional failure, poor and unthinking leadership. The discourse also observed that there is a major breakdown of elite consensus in Nigeria today because we have privileged ethnic identity, over other crucial identities in the countries. Hence, there's a breakdown in trust and the requisite reciprocity that helps a society to run effectively. The discourse also observed the elite consensus, that elite consensus reflect the failure of political parties in maintaining and building elite consensus. The nature of the breakdown has meant the criminalization of politics in the country, and this explains the impunity we experience everywhere in Nigeria today. Then the discourse also observed that there are no national parties, and that is why there's a character deficit among political leaders in the country today. Starting from some of these observations, these are some of the recommendations as profiled by the discussion here today. That the diaspora has a role to play in the development discourse, lose sight of the power of our culture and community, social capital, power of collective is so important. That the issue of demographic taking, so we need to engage the capacity of our people to arrest, especially the Jackpot syndrome. Then there's also the possibility of youth empowerment, the liberation of youth energy and creativity by taking advantage of the latest innovations such as coding, among others. And then also that the root causes of conflict in the country must be addressed. There is a need for a dexterous leadership that is adept at resolving the multivarious problems in Nigeria. Professional groups such as academia must confront the politicians who take charge of the discourse on governance. We shouldn't shrink from our responsibility. Socio-economic disparity must be addressed, and addressing such will require the inclusive economic policy, educational investments, vocational training, and resuscitating the vocational and technical training, creating incubators for the enhancement of young people to create opportunity and reduce poverty. There is a need for addressing the issue of pollution and climate change, investment in renewable energy, and ensuring sustainable farming practice. Also, there's a recommendation that for the enhancement of security, there must be intelligence gathering, regional cooperation, among others. And Nigerian states need to prioritize our educational sector. So I believe, like I said, the discussion continues. And as we continue to engage in different fora, many recommendations, strategies on how to move this nation will continue to evolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, HOD Dr. Kodri. Professor Ademola Adeleke, thank you for coming. We appreciate your presence. The other professors who are here, Professor Loto, Professor Maike, as well as the many attendees online. I must also mention the Deputy Vice Chancellor Development Service, Professor Ayodele Asenwa, who's online. Thank you so very much. Those of us on site and those of us online, thank you for the patience. So to draw the curtain for this particular edition, I want to invite another head of department who is also part of those that worked in the background to make this particular edition a success.
Please join me with a round of applause as we invite Dr. Michael Kunuchi to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I say good afternoon to you all. Permit me also to stand on the protocol that's been established already. My job has been made very easy. Mr. Ebenezer Ishola has thanked many of the people I ordinarily should be thanking, and Professor Babawale also has done part of that job. So it's going to be brief because we're behind schedule already. So I want to start by thanking God Almighty for making this a reality. All of this was planned in less than 1 week. And I think we should very warmly appreciate the Dean of the faculty with an applause. Thank you very much, Professor Laja Odukoya. And that's what you get when you have a visionary leader. In so short a time, he put all of this together. We thank you very much for your leadership. And it's our prayer that God will continue to fill you with wisdom to lead the faculty. I also want to thank Professor Toyin Falola. We will all agree that he is such an asset to Nigeria and to Africa and to the world We thank you very especially for creating time to thank Professor Babafemi Badejo for the wonderful presentation. We take nothing for granted. We're grateful. And we thank Professor Tunde Babawale. We thank Professor, we're happy to have Professor Babawale, and we hope that we will see more of him. He's meant to be one of us, but we hardly see him. So this is such a wonderful occasion for us. We're happy to have you with us. Thank you so much, sir. And also Professor Adele Jinadu, we're very grateful. We thank you for being part of this. We see Prof more often. He's such a father to the faculty, and we thank you very much for all you do. We're grateful. We also want to thank all those who participated in this interaction, those who are physically present. I think we should appreciate ourselves with an applause. Thank you so much for creating time to be here. And we thank all those who joined online. We thank especially staff. In fact, at a time I checked, we had over 170 at a time, about 180 at a time. So, and that's an impressive number. So we thank you. Let's appreciate all the people who joined virtually. We thank you. We appreciate you. And that tells us that we will go very far. This is just the beginning. We're very grateful. We want to thank all the professors who participated, those who participated in person, and those who joined online. We appreciate you. We also thank our students and our alumni, our students who are here now, and those who have graduated. We appreciate you all, and we trust that you'll continue to represent the university very well. We also want to thank the non-teaching staff who supported the committee that planned these events. And I also want to thank very especially the chair of the committee, Dr. Quadri, the acting head of political science. Thank you very much. And all other members of that committee, we say thank you. And on this note, I think we should just bring the event to a close. Thank you all.